Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. I'm a human who cares about supporting other humans. On this podcast, we'll explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who have found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others. I believe that when we feel more connected and seen, magic can happen. I am really super excited. I say this every episode. I'm going to have to come up with a list of words to use, but today I'm excited. I am honored. I am happy, privileged, whatever words we want to use. But I'm really just happy to be here with Emily Horwood from the UK. So another one of my colleagues from across the pond, across the continent. Really just excited to bring more stories to the podcast from other points on the planet. And I am going to hand it over to you, Emily. Tell us who you are, how you would like to be known, and anything you'd like us to know about you.
Hi, Paul. Oh, God, I'm so happy to be talking to you. I'm Emily, as you mentioned, and I live in England in a lovely place called St Albans. However, as I mentioned to you, I am originally from London, and yeah, you can take the girl out of London, but you can't take the London out of the girl. I'm a real postcode snob. I'm like, I'm from North London. But it's a big part of my identity, so I feel like it's an important thing to mention. I am a primary school teacher by trade. So I think in the US, I'm not sure what you call that, but it's sort of for the younger children.
Mm-hmm. Elementary school, we'd call that over here. Yeah.
Right. Okay. But I haven't taught for a couple of years, or well, since COVID, really, actually. But first and foremost, I am a mummy. That's the way I see myself, my role in the world. I'm a mum of two beautiful children who are aged 8 and 10, a girl and a boy. And I am, the caregiver. I'm a single parent. So that has its own, huge, a lot comes with that, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been a single parent since my son was 6 months old. So I have brought them up myself, essentially. So that's really been my full-time job. But I would consider myself to be a very sociable. However, sort of reflecting on it, I also can be quite reclusive, and I really savor and enjoy my own company. So when I say sociable, I mean, I love talking, I love communicating, and I love people. I love learning about people and listening to people. But when it's time for me to kind of, I don't need to be around people all of the time. And like I said, I am also very comfortable being with myself.
It's interesting, if I may, when you talk about this, it's interesting because this conversation comes up a lot in my circles too, right? And it comes back to this kind of conversation around introversion and extroversion. Is people always assume that if you're sociable and you like to talk to people, that you're an extrovert, and that if you're an introvert, you kind of have to be shy and reclusive and that sort of thing. And it's interesting because it doesn't really have anything to do with what you do or how you show up. It has to do with what it takes for you to recharge and energize. And so I'm hearing you say, yes, I love people. I love telling stories. I love being sociable. And my battery needs to be recharged because it gets expended by doing these things. Whereas somebody who's maybe more of a textbook extrovert, all those things actually charge the battery. So the more they do it, the more they want it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I say that selfishly and self-referencingly because that's kind of how I am. People are like, you can't be an introvert. And it's like, yeah,
absolutely.
I can get on stage and sing and dance just like anybody else. But when I'm done, I'm literally done. Exactly. And I think I'm hearing you say that.
Completely. Well, funny you mentioned the stage because I trained in performing arts up until the age of 18. So it was all singing, all dancing, jazz hands, kind of outer confidence, oozing with confidence. Like I say, talk to anybody and, quite a kind of flamboyant, theatrical on the outside. But actually, as I've got older, particularly in the last few years, I've realized that is almost a facade and that I'm kind of getting to know myself. I'm stripping back, I'm taking off the costume, if you like. And I'm kind of seeing for the first time what's underneath.
Interesting. If we were in session, I could be, there's so many questions I could ask, but what I'm hearing you say is that it felt like a costume, and yet is it just that costume no longer serves? Was it a costume, or was it just that season's wardrobe necessarily? I don't know. Only you would know. I felt like I had to ask that question. That's what I'm curious about. But let's get into it today. One of the questions I ask first of all of my guests is, what's your intention for yourself with our conversation today? What would you like to have from the conversation?
I think for me, having this conversation for myself is development in my own kind of understanding of where I've been stuck, really. It provides me with an opportunity to reflect on the last few years, really, and just to kind of sit and to really, be in it, because obviously situations in our lives and times in our lives where we have felt stuck or, uncomfortable emotions come up. A lot of the time we tend to ignore them. We tend to brush them under the carpet. We tend to escape them using things. So I think for me, it's a healthy process for me to sit and talk about it. But also, I think having had experience of people just talking really openly and honestly, I know how much it's helped me. My intention is just to be honest, and hopefully someone can kind of pick up on things and relate to what I'm saying, in that we're all human, and that actually these markers in our lives, however painful or negative or difficult, can bounce you on to the next chapter, and there's always another chapter. So there's always hope. There's always change. So that's kind of my intention, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So many neat things in what you shared, right? Like the comma is a pause. It's not an end. That's what periods are for. There's always another chapter. So there's always more story to be written, which is, I think so helpful sometimes for us to hear, is even if you don't know where you're going or don't know how you're going to get there, just knowing that this pause is a pause. And then the other things that you said also kind of really support this point that, and the pause can be useful, because like you said, like it may bounce you onto someplace else, that you weren't imagining. So thank you for sharing that.
That's fine. No, and at the time, it's that classic thing of people like, oh, it takes time heals. And when you're sat on that comma, it's very, very hard to imagine that it's going to be removed, that pain will be removed. But thankfully, people like you and podcasts like this, and just people being open and honest, it helps people to realize that it does pass.
Well, and you even said this, and now you've just reinforced it, right? It's like, when you're in it, it's almost like, who's going to write the book that says, when you're in it, don't even try, because like it doesn't matter what anybody tells you. You just have to experience it. Right. And so you just said, like, when you're in it, it doesn't matter what people say. People say it takes time, and you're like, what the fuck, man? Like, it's just not sticking. But here you are now reflectively talking back about it, not only to share that experience with anybody who might be listening, but also for you to go back and personally debrief the experience. You yourself said, like, now I want to go back and kind of look at it and reflect on it and see what else might come out of that for me.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you. My intention for today, as it always is to create space for you to be able to tell your story. I'm really excited to hear what you're going to share. I know you and I had a conversation about different stories you could tell, and I'm like, I don't want to know your story until you share it with me too. Is that in the telling of your story, someone else does get inspiration because they're currently stuck and sitting on a comma, And maybe that helps them get through just this one more day, right? And maybe somebody else hears your story and says, yeah, you know what? I think I might need to go back and kind of look at what happened to me or happened for me in a different lens and see what else is there for me. But either way, that people see themselves in your story and they see that they're not alone and they see that they're connected more than they believed they were in the moment, and that they treat themselves a little bit more gently than they might have been in the moment or the prior day. So let's get started. So the first question is, where have you found yourself sitting on a comma in your life?
Well, when I thought about that question, I actually thought about how many commas there have been in my life. There have been quite a few chapters and quite a few moments of feeling stuck. But I thought that I'd mainly focus on the one that has led me on the journey that I'm currently on. I mean, I can give you a month and a year of when I was stuck, and it was October 2020, and it was to do with a relationship that I had basically started with the relationship that I had pinned all of my hopes and dreams on this person. It was a very unhealthy choice to begin with, because I sort of dived into it completely. I seem to have done this for most of my adult life. I spiral into these relationships and I go all in, guns blazing. Everything else goes by the wayside, and I make this person, you know, the top priority, this relationship, the top priority. And I think this one in particular, there was so much riding on it for me because of what had kind of led up to it. As I touched on, I had a unhealthy relationship with my children's father for 10 years. We were sort of on and off for 10 years, really. We split up a lot of times during that period. And I've always searched for the dream. I've always searched for, I've never been married. I'm 44 on Sunday, but I always thought when I was young and people used to say, what do you want to be when you're older? I used to say, I want to be a housewife. And I want to be, you know, a good wife and keep the house clean. And I want a white picket fence. And I mean, I remember vividly, that was my ambition. That's what I wanted. So you know, my whole kind of teenage and adult life is this dream, this fantasy of having this 2.4 family that I've never had. But the reason I say 2020 is because, like I say, I went in guns blazing and it ended very, very suddenly. I was abroad. I got sent a message. He'd moved into my house. My children had met him. I thought this was it. I thought I was set for life. Not in any kind of financial way or anything like that, but I thought I was getting my dream. I was getting my white picket fence. And when I got that message, I was so utterly floored. I mean, I was so broken that it terrified me. I'd never, you know, I've been through breakups before, but I have never, I couldn't lift my head off the pillow. I was so distraught. And hindsight is a wonderful thing. And it did make me, like now I can look back and realize that it wasn't him. It was really nothing to do with him. It was the dream. It was everything that I'd pinned my hopes on had been taken away from me again, you know, and that was my kind of thinking at that time. So that sort of the place I found myself in, I was, like I say, I was so utterly broken that was really the tipping point. Thankfully, again, in hindsight, I can look back and I am grateful for what happened, because that has since led to a massive journey of self-discovery. But it really was that, you know, I had 2 children, I was working, and I was incapable. I couldn't think of anything else. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I was essentially having some sort of, you know, mild breakdown. And I was just, and I hated myself. I hated myself for, you know, I sat and thought, I'm not good enough. You know, those natural questions that you ask when someone ends a relationship with you. But more than that, I hated myself for how weak I felt and how pathetic I felt. And so my inner dialogue was just so unhealthy. Once that had happened, I was a very, very big drinker. And once that happened, I literally drowned my sorrows in alcohol. I mean, I bathed in it. And after a few months, I started to actually get quite worried. And that was really also the make or break point of like, if I don't do something about my life and about my self-esteem and about what I actually want and who I actually am, then I can't see myself falling out of this well that I've fallen into. I can't get out of it. Something needs to change, you know. And there is a lot of there's a lot of backstory, you know, prior to this relationship, like with regards to men. And as I've mentioned to you in the past, I had a really horrible relationship in my early 20s with someone who was really physically abusive. And that to me came as, again, only now through my own journey now am I able to look back on it. That I think really was the cornerstone of the slippery slope that I started to go down with regards to, you know, where I was looking for attention and affection, and also soothing my soul with alcohol, really. So, and that again, like I'd never seen anyone punch someone in the face. I'd never, you know, I'd not even on the street. I certainly had never seen it in my own home. I'd never had a fight, you know, so and also we'd been together for 6 months and I thought that we were really in love. And then to get literally punched in the face, I think that there's a lot that I haven't looked at with regards to that. I haven't talked to anyone about it at length. I haven't processed it even now because I don't know, because I feel so sorry for that Emily. I feel that I'm so shocked. Like people around me, people that knew me I kept it from people for about 6 months until I physically couldn't keep it from them anymore. But they were like, you know, wanting to shake me themselves and say, what are you doing? You're worth so much more. Like, it's insane, you know. But for some reason, which I'm trying to slowly work out, I couldn't let go of it. And also he was that classic abuse where the only person I thought could make it better was him. So the morning after, it would always be a cuddle and I've got you. And that's and I sort of melted and felt held by my abuser, essentially. So from that point in my early 20s, like I said, my relationship choices have definitely not been healthy. And I have not been healthy, more importantly. So I feel blessed, really, really blessed that I am now not stuck and that I have, you know, I am finding and having a go at really sort of getting underneath it all and discovering who Emily is.
Emily, I want to just take a moment for some huge acknowledgements for you. So first to just acknowledge the experiences that you've had and that you've shared with us, and thank you for the courage and the vulnerability to be able to put that out there. I can see, how like important is the word that comes to mind. It is to your story and to what you're describing so far with us as your journey. I can't even begin to imagine what that experience was like and how difficult it was for you. And
I think, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think also, like, it makes me think about, again, it's so much more than just the person that I was in a relationship with. Like I say, I feel sorry for that Emily. Like, I just want to give her a cuddle, but now that I am sober, now that I am, I feel like I'm awake. I am starting to look back at these things. And there was a time when I went to a women's refuge. I was fortunate enough to have my own flat. It wasn't his flat. So I was able to get him out eventually. But I went to this refuge when I was in the madness of it all. And I sat in this room in Camden in North London. And there was the woman sat me down, and I was in a room, and this always makes me feel emotional again for that Emily. And I looked around, and there was a box of toys and teddies under a table, and I didn't have kids at that age. And I said to her, I turned around to her, and I said, I don't feel like I feel like someone else should have this time. I basically didn't feel like I deserved the care and attention that these people were giving me because I had my own flat, because I was financially solvent, because I'd gone to a private school. I didn't fit the bill. And I saw those toys and thought, oh my God, I can't imagine what it must be like, And I'd gone through this list as a standard list that people, you go through. It's like a tick list of, unfortunately, of, physical scenarios that you've been put through, which I'd done with this woman. And I said to her, I don't feel like I deserve to be here. And she said, Emily, you've just ticked like 18 out of the 20 on this list. Like, you do deserve to be here. And even now, like, that has been a theme throughout my life, that I don't know whether it's imposter syndrome. I'm not sure what it is, but I just don't feel sometimes that I deserve the support or the goodness.
Yeah, this is really bringing up a lot of really deep things for you, is what I'm seeing. Give you a moment to kind of be with what you're experiencing right now. What I'm hearing you say is that, this relationship in 2020 and how it ended was such a rattling experience, so abrupt, and so, you use the words broken and terrified is how it left you. You started by telling us about that, and I can see how that took you back. Like, you started with this relationship and how it ended, but you've been talking about all the relationships, particularly this one that was so significant and so traumatic. And now I see you kind of like going back down the timeline. So I'm curious. It's kind of our second question, and I don't want to interrupt this flow of what you're sharing with us with a question, but I will, because I think you've already been answering it, and I want to give you space to open up and maybe elaborate more. It seems like this relationship somehow was profound, because look where you are now, and now look where you're reflecting back on. So I'll ask this question, and you take it where you want. But the ending of this relationship in 2020, what did that create for you, sitting on that comma?
It was a real make or break moment for me. And what it created was a feeling of something needs to change. There needs to be a shift. in my life. I have absolutely no idea how I'm going to get off the coma. I really don't. But I cannot, for the sake of my children as well as myself, as they were getting, they're getting older and understanding more and seeing more. I have to make a change. And also, just very briefly, like my father passed away, it was 11 years ago, and we didn't have the sort of relationship where I would go to him for advice about things in my life. He was very old school. I'm the youngest of six, but he was 47 when he had me. He was, he was old school, but, and my mum remarried and was doing her own thing. So, and that all happened. Well, my mum, left my dad when I met the first partner, in that abusive relationship, which I don't think is necessarily a coincidence as to why I lent so deeply into that. So my point being that, like, when I was on this, sitting on this coma and felt so stuck, I didn't really feel like I had anywhere to turn. And so I just felt like I needed to dig deeper than I've ever dug before and try and find the answer myself, really.
What was different this time? Because you've just very, very honestly and openly shared with us these very difficult experiences with relationships. And this time something was different.
I think this is when when I started to really look at my drinking. And to be honest, people had talked about it and brought it up in the past, but I was so desperate that I thought to myself, like, I need to shake my life up completely. Drinking alcohol was literally it was who I was. It was a massive, massive part of Emily. So I had to look at the big parts of my life and be brave enough to take a step to try and change them. So that's kind of where it all started. And like I said, I felt like I had nothing left, but I literally had nowhere to go, like, metaphorically, and nothing more to lose, because in my eyes, I'd lost everything, like hope. And, aside from him, I'd lost the hope. I'd lost all my self-esteem, my self-worth, however much of that I had at that point. And so I thought, you know what, like, let's do it. Like, I had a few friends who go to different fellowships, and I randomly reached out to someone on Instagram that I hadn't seen for 20 years and just sent a message and just said, I think I need to stop drinking. Because I genuinely thought to myself, if I'm sat here in this space and I'm drinking on top of it, I am pouring petrol onto a fire. And I've got 2 children and I don't know where it's going to end. And if I fall any further down, I genuinely don't know if I'm going to be able to get up again. So it scared me because I love my children, obviously. So as I say, I reached out. It took me so long. It wasn't like one of those, not just about the alcohol. It like the grief of the feeling that I felt in that October. It took me months. And like I mentioned at the beginning, normally people know me as kind of sparky Emily and, cheery, full of beans. And I couldn't even hide it. Like, as I said, I've worn a costume for a lot of years. I'm normally really good at hiding it. There was not a chance that I could hide how I was feeling. So it started with removing alcohol. That's where the change began.
You shared so much, and I kind of interrupted you earlier. When you were in your story, because you had started talking, you had shared about your first relationship, and you kind of started connecting the dots with all the relationships. And then there's this relationship, it ends, and it almost sounds like what you're describing is it sent you even deeper. And by doing so, deep enough to catch your attention.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what did you learn about yourself, through this experience and even from this point? Because it sounds like you still got a lot of story to tell. So, I mean, that is our next question. So what did you learn, or what are you learning, from that point?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about kind of like where I'm at now, what I'm learning is that, as I've touched on, it's got really very little to do with the people, the men that are in the story, but it's got so much to do about me. And I never realized that. I never, joined those dots. And I have reached a point, or I'm reaching, kind of through this self-discovery, realizing that I have used men, love, relationships, lust, alcohol, drugs to kind of avoid myself, for a long time. And even just saying that out loud now, I've never described it as that.
Unpack that. Stay with that for a moment and go a little deeper, especially since you said you haven't really said that out loud. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think, like when someone would say, "Oh, how do you describe yourself?" I've always really struggled to describe myself. I know how other people see me. I could easily ask a friend to describe me, and I'm sure they'd say bubbly, chatty, friendly. But again, I'm uncomfortable with describing myself, And so I think that the reason that I use the word avoid is perhaps because I was just I feel like I'd let myself down, all those years ago. I feel like I look back and I'm like, where was my self-worth? So I'm almost appalled by myself, if I'm honest, which is a really harsh thing to say to myself.
Go ahead.
Sorry, because I know when people are in abusive relationships or suffer abuse, of course I know it's not that person's fault. But I still haven't kind of just really addressed why I was able to let Emily be treated like that.
Well, I'm curious about something. I'm no therapist, right? I'm a coach, but not a therapist. And this isn't therapy or coaching, but you tell me if any of this resonates or if I'm just off the mark. But you said, I didn't really know how to describe myself. And what came up for me is this thought, and I don't think it's uncommon for people. I've certainly experienced it as well. It's like when we really don't know how to identify ourselves, then that need for identification is strong. So where do we go to find it? We find it in the people that we surround ourselves with.
Yeah.
And so this sense of, again, these are all just things that are coming up for me, this sense of attaching ourselves to others and then identifying ourselves with or of or by them. And I'm wondering, just kind of based on what you've shared with us, I'm wondering if that was part of what you were doing for whatever reason that might be. Is
completely. I wanted to be in that. I wanted to be the girlfriend. I wanted to be the wife. I identified myself as the party girl, as the drinker, as the socialite. For years I've spent way too much money on high-end brands of shit that I don't need. All that stuff. It's all stuff, isn't it? Like you say, you attach yourself to people, places and things, really. And for me, it was alcohol as well. Like you say, maybe it was me kind of searching for some sort of identity,
which that's to be acknowledged, right? I mean, like you said, like, I didn't really know how to describe myself. So, I mean, isn't everybody searching for their identity at some point or another, or always in some way or another? So that in and of itself doesn't have any kind of value assigned to it, good or bad or right or wrong. It's like searching.
Yeah. But I think that what I'm loving so much now that I've removed alcohol and that I am really delving into myself is that I'm actually discovering real, authentic Emily. You know, my real identity. Not always comfortable. It's not always a comfortable feeling discovering things about myself, or, you know, and things are so new. Like, I was a massive people pleaser and would say, yes, I'll do this, or, you know, yes, I'll go there. And that, you know, so for example, that thing of actually setting some healthy boundaries. I mean, I've never had a boundary in my life. So doing that, it doesn't feel comfortable, but I know that it helps to keep me well, and that it's growth, and that the more I do something like that, the better and well-rounded I will become.
And I have to acknowledge you. I'm going to step in on that, because what our listeners can't see is that as you've been telling the story, this has been obviously very moving for you, and you've gone through these stages of these feelings and emotions. And when you said, what I'm learning about Emily, your face lit up, you sat up taller, you were smiling, you were grinning. I mean, just this change that came over you when you started thinking about the Emily that you are now and the Emily that you're learning about.
Yeah. Oh God, Paul, I'm like, honestly, I am buzzing in my life at the moment. You know, and genuinely for the first time in my life, I am really proud of me. I am so proud of me. And I don't say that with any fear around what people might think about me saying that. I am, for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm nurturing myself, and I'm looking after myself, and I'm putting the work in, because it is work. It's not easy to make massive changes after 44 years, but I'm doing everything I can to put one foot in front of the other and keep walking in the direction that I'm walking in. You know, I feel like I've done a complete 180. And I do want to acknowledge that the fundamental part of that is removing alcohol. Like, there is no way I would still be on that comma. In fact, I'd have fallen right off it and I'd be on the floor completely. Yeah. There's no way I could have moved my life forward in any way until I removed alcohol. And I didn't realize the severity of what I call and consider my alcoholism. You know, there's so much, you know, you could talk about this for weeks, but, you know, everyone has their opinions on that word. But, you know, I wasn't a park bench drinker with a bottle of vodka every morning. My sofa was my park bench, you know, and in the end, I say I'm sociable. In the end, obviously having 2 young kids, I would sit on my sofa, I'd sit alone and I would drink. But it really, as I'm learning, is that you remove the alcohol. And I thought that was it. I thought, okay, I just don't pick up a drink. Like, anytime I feel anything, which is what I used to do, I just won't pick up a drink. But now what I'm discovering and unpacking is like, whoa, there's a whole load of other stuff going on, you know? And I feel like, without being too woo-woo, I feel genuinely like I'm having a rebirth. I feel like I have never felt so awake in all my life. And I really feel like at this point in my life, I'm getting to know Emily and I'm giving her a chance, you know.
Well, and you've already started answering this next question, which is what has changed, you know, in your life as a result of sitting on this comma. Very descriptive. And again, you're smiling and grinning.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, not because I'm looking for causation, but correlation. Was alcohol part of your life during all of these other relationships?
Well, because I work a 12-step program, you do need to kind of, you know, you look back at your life and your relationship with alcohol. And that first relationship, the one that I was talking about earlier, which correlated with my parents splitting up and divorcing, with me moving out of home for the first time, with my mum remarrying, that relationship, that period of my life in my early 20s is when my relationship with alcohol changed, and drugs. Cocaine's a part of my story. But it, you know, and it's only recently that I recognized that. It, you know, when I wasn't really that bothered about alcohol when I was, you know, prior to that. Yeah. But there was a massive shift then. So yeah, it has always been a common thread, Paul. And to be fair, I've always sought people out that drink like I did, because it's hiding in plain sight. You know, it kind of justifies my level of drinking.
Well, there's that identity piece again. And I want to be very clear about something here. As somebody who also no longer drinks and ended my relationship with alcohol, I didn't ask that question in any way, shape, or form to assign responsibility or blame to you for those relationships because you were drinking. I was just curious because you and I both know, because we've gone through some training together, you and I both know that if there's these other elements in the relationship, it makes it cloudy. It makes it difficult to be clear in the relationship. So I just wanted to make sure that I'm very clear for anybody who's listening here. This wasn't to go back and assign blame to you for drinking and somehow make that abusive relationship your fault. It's just looking at where this ingredient plays a role in our relationships and our ability to see, right? And so, because I have so much empathy for that first relationship, Emily, and how absolutely challenging and my word, not yours, horrific that had to have been for you. And so, you know, it's understandable when we turn to things that are going to bring us some kind of solace and comfort. I too, have never been in a relationship where I wasn't also drinking, you know, and no other inferences there. So I'm really curious, you know, now at this age, if I get in another relationship, what that'll be like without there being alcohol at any point or any time in that relationship. And so that's where you are. That's what you're sharing with us.
Yeah, completely. And it was the thread all the way through, really. But having removed it now, and like I said, like peeling the layers of the onion and seeing the positive impact that it's having in my life and with my relationship with myself, and, you know, and everything I've talked about, that self-worth, that self-respect, self-esteem, gratitude, you know, listen, I'm not skipping through the flower fields every day. Of course I'm not. And that's not what your Instagram says. Oh God!
I just had to for fun though. Like I don't mean to diminish what you're saying here, but it's so funny because, you know, people will see your social media posts and they're like, Emily, that's exactly what you're doing. You're talking about having Spain all to yourself at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it's like that's what you shared because that was so exciting for you. Yeah, and what an honor.
Because I want people to get the buzz of it. You know what I mean? I want people to understand the gravity of the difference, you know, and I'm not sitting here preaching or expecting everyone to put down alcohol, but I'm just saying for me, and the reason that, that I chose that stuck comma with that relationship is because, you know, it just led me down a path of taking a look at, okay, what have I been doing consistently in my life, you know, for the last 20 years? Hold on a minute. I haven't been happy for the last 20 years. I don't really feel like my true, authentic self. You know, what can I remove, shift, change? It might not be alcohol for some, but all I know is that for me, it's a total game changer and it is changing my life massively. But I need to sort of acknowledge Alcoholics Anonymous, which is where I went into the room in the December of 2020. And it's funny because obviously there's like a huge kind of taboo or judgment or perception of what it's like, you know. And also I'm one of those people like, oh, they're not wearing the right shoes, or like, oh, their hair, you know, I used to be like super judgy, super bitchy. Like, it's just, I hate to admit it, but you know, that's what I was like. You know, you'd sit there and slag celebrities off online and all that sort of toxic stuff, you know, and I walk into these rooms where, as I'm sure you know, there is every walk of life, from every status, financial, you know, like every age, every kind of demographic. And there's not one point that I have ever sat in one of those rooms and felt like, I don't belong here. These aren't my people, you know, and to be honest, they could be talking about alcohol, or they could be talking about, you know, how they're feeling that day. You know, it's not specifically around the alcohol that I feel so connected and so at home there. It's because it's a room full of people that are being completely authentic. And it is the most refreshing thing to hear strangers or people that become friends just walking into a room and opening their mouths and talking from their heart. And I didn't get it. I didn't think that that can make you well. I didn't think that can get you unstuck, you know. And I'm not advertising AA or the 12-step program. What my point is that communication, is that dialogue, because it has taught me now, you know, as I've had a conversation with you about 20 minutes after I first met you, you know, as I talk to my neighbors, as I talk to, you know, anyone that wants to talk to me, I am now going to be completely transparent and open and honest, because actually I haven't been for all these years. And through AA and it you know, this kind of journey, I feel the benefit of living my life like that, not only for myself, but hopefully, you know, it's funny, isn't it? Like when you start to just be your true self to someone, how other people respond. Like, you know, I can be in the queue at the supermarket and I'll just say something, you know, that's from my heart. And then people start unraveling to me, you know, and I love it, because that's kind of my new addiction, is that connection with people. So it might be me and you talking, you know, it might be on Instagram, me talking to a complete stranger. I just love it. And I just feel like that is what has changed my life and has changed me and has got me off the comma, if I'm quite honest, is realizing that the majority of people out there are beautiful and that aren't judgy and that don't care how I look or how I want to be perceived. And that actually, if we all just strip back those layers a little bit, that's where the beauty is. That's where the magic happens. And I feel free. I feel free.
Yeah. A couple of things strike me. Like, one, the darkness is hidden behind the secrets. And when you pull the secrets back, you shine light on it. Right. And also, like, the shift, it sounds like, you correct me where I misreflect any of this. This is what it sounds like to me, is if you have always been a seeker of your identity, you've gone from or come from a place of seeking your identity in the attachments to other relationships. And when you put the alcohol down, I'm grossly oversimplifying this, but you just described, like, when I went to AA, it wasn't even just about the be with drinkers. It was the hearing these stories and hearing of all of these authentic experiences. It's like that was a different way to show up and seek your identity. And what I hear you say is that I saw myself in these other people and their experiences and saw myself in a different way that has allowed me to feel more me.
Exactly. And exactly that. Listening to and seeing people being vulnerable and, you know, really opening up about the most, you know, difficult times in their lives or the most personal times really taught me to do the same, like you say, and find my own identity. I feel like I am growing up in AA and in my sober community, and, you know, and it's not just these things, you know, I'm obsessed with podcasts. You know, all like self-development. I love it. I'm reading, I'm doing courses, I'm stepping out of those oh, you're not good enough, you can't do it sort of circles. And I'm feeling the fear or feeling the faith and doing it anyway. So it's a multitude of things, but I really feel like I am giving myself a chance, but that I'm also being held by, like I could say again, like a virtual community, people that I've met. I feel like it's like a unity almost. And I feel safe to be able to just be me. And a big thing for me was always, what are people going to think? What do people think of me? And again, I'm nowhere near at the end of the road. I don't think there ever is the end of the road. So I'm not completely there yet, but I'm so much better than I was. The amount of headspace I used to waste worrying about what certain people thought about my choices. And now I don't know whether it's just because I know that they're the right choices, or that because they're my choices and they're coming from a sober, and I don't just mean with alcohol, I mean an emotionally, mentally sober place, and that I believe them to be the right thing for me. So actually all of that, what she's going to think, is kind of been removed, and there's such a freedom I feel in that. I mean, it's a complete game changer to everything that I want to do. Like, it's almost like I'm parenting myself, and I'm giving myself a little kind of carry along, and, like, it'll be all right. Keep doing what you're doing. It's like I'm giving myself a pat on the back, and it's a lovely, lovely feeling, because as I've described previously, I didn't always talk to myself like that, and it's about the way that we talk to ourselves. And it's again, it's not easy to shift that inner critic in your voice. It's to get the drinking for a moment. That voice, it's changing a habit of a lifetime, changing, that inner dialogue. And so I have to catch myself, and I still don't, sometimes. A friend of mine said to me years ago, Emily, if someone knocked on your door and spoke to you the way that you speak to yourself, you'd probably ring the police. But now I'm like learning to just give myself a bit of a break. And also, if I feel the need, give myself a little pat on the back. It changes everything. Like I said, like I've mentioned, self-esteem, self-worth, my relationships with people, my relationships with my kids. I can see that they can see a difference in me, a huge difference. And it means everything,
And you're describing going from periods of your life where you use something else to try to deal with or handle the situations in your life. And that was, the alcohol and the couch/park bench, right? So now it's your own resourcefulness. And the difference, because you've used the word addiction twice, and one was the addiction to these substances. And then you said, oh, and now I'm addicted to podcasts and things like that. And even just the reframe of this word addiction, right? Like, you can be addicted to things that don't serve you, and you can be addicted to things that do serve you. And there are plenty of people, because I've heard way more stories than I care to, of people who say, oh, they get criticized because, now they're just changing their addiction. So it's still the same thing. You haven't really solved anything. And first of all, these people who feel compelled to say something like that need to check in with what's their intention and motivation. Like, what do they get out of trying to put you back into that box? And secondly, the addiction isn't necessarily the issue. It's what you're addicted to, right? Addiction is simply means something that I do so much that I can't stop. And so it doesn't really factor in your motivation. You could be addicted to alcohol as a substance, and you're addicted because it is addictive chemically, right? You can be addicted to podcasts that help you grow as a person because you like what you get out of them, and you enjoy them, and you like having the choice, right? Like, everything can be unpacked, but I'm just seeing
completely. And also, I'm, if we're on the subject of, people being careful about what they say, or mindful about what they say about things like that, is that also this massive taboo around the word alcoholic. To me, there have been people in my life that have basically kind of said, don't be so ridiculous, Emily. Like, kind of raising the eyebrows. And to me, I just think, it's a word, you know, and everyone's journey and everyone's experience and everyone's addiction is different, is personal, is their own. But B, I'm like, if I'm trying to take positive steps to step out of a hole that I have been in for 20 years or more, just let me do that. Does it matter what I call it? Does it really matter? Why does it matter to you?
Right. And you and I both know, right? It matters because it's about them. Mm-hmm. Because for whatever reason, and I'm not saying it's good or bad or right or wrong, we're all mirrors to each other. And they use that word with you because it means something to them, which is really more about what they need to look at within themselves, not about you. Because you and I are both doing this work, and so many of us are doing this work and realizing that. I've been told, that, when we quit drinking, that we get, other people see us as being a little bit preachy and self-righteous and that sort of thing. And I'm like, okay, I'll take that. Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what? Yeah. I don't apologize for it. I certainly don't intend to make anybody else feel like I'm preaching to them. It's also part of the process. It's kind of like this. We're just so excited about things, right?
Exactly. But I think it's like, it's worth noting that, like, for some people who are addicted to alcohol or to any other substance, that can be really a dangerous thing to say to somebody, like, oh, don't be silly, or just basically to undermine their efforts to try and improve their life. Let's have it right. Any kind of, illegal drug or drink is not good for you, right? On any level. So, but I'm just quite passionate about that, in that thing of, like, just allow people. I mean, I guess it's because I've learned this moving on, in the path that I've been on. Just let people be who they want to be. Let them do what they want to do. The serenity prayer. What's in my control and what isn't? Like, I'm in control of my choices. You do what you're going to do. Yeah. But again, I've got a lot better at not even acknowledging people's opinions, but just kind of not letting it really seep into my pores, not letting it resonate too much, because I literally have, I was going to say the best kept secret, but it's not, because you're sober too. And so are millions of people. But I'm like, I don't care what you think, because sobriety is literally the best life hack ever.
It is amazing, right? It is amazing, because it's like, once you get it and you wish everybody else could have it, is when you realize, like, the only thing I can control here is how much I have it and how much I enjoy it. So it's like, the one thing that's like, oh, I wish I could give it to everybody, is like, and they can only come to this on their own. They can literally only come to this on their own if they choose, as you were saying.
Exactly.
So I'm gonna, I would love to, and who knows, maybe someday I will have an alcohol-free podcast, and you and I'll have more conversation around that particular topic. I want to bring us back to you and your story that you shared with us today. I believe you've already answered my last question, which was, what does getting off the comma look like for you? Is there anything else you would add to that before we close?
I'll probably sort of reiterate what I've said, but in sort of words, I just think it looks like, to me, or it feels like, an awakening. It feels like I am waking up. I feel like I said, it was the October 2020 when I felt stuck, but really, having talked through that whole story, and from my early 20s, I've been stuck for 20 years. I might have slipped off and on now and again, but overall I've been stuck. I just feel like I'm giving Emily a really good chance, and that things do pass, and we've talked about this, but that's another thing I'm learning. Like I said, not every day is roses, but I'm learning to sit through the uncomfortable feelings. And those feelings are teaching me more about myself. Someone said this to me the other day. They said, it's not what happens to you, it happens through you. And I was like, whoa. And so true, right? Because for 20 years, everything was happening to me. It's everyone else's fault. And look how I'm being left to feel. And, and understanding that now, that like everything is transient. Again, if someone had told me that in October 2020, when I felt like, I couldn't breathe for 3-4 months, I don't know what I would have done with that information. But in hindsight, I'm like, okay, like this is going to be a massive turning point in your life. If you're brave enough, if you take a step, just one step forward, and then maybe another one, then change will come. Because I did feel so stuck for so long. And that was, in AA terms, that was the rock bottom of it,
Yeah.
and I'm just putting one foot in front of the other, and I don't feel stuck anymore. I don't even know about the journey and the destination. There isn't one. There isn't a destination, but each foot I put in front of the other, I feel stronger. I feel more content. I feel more peaceful. I feel more like myself, like my true self.
Such a powerful story. And so last things here, just so much, you've got me thinking about things, and, there's a number of things, even as I'm reflecting back and writing the show notes for this, there's going to be a couple of things that move from that over onto my own, like topics for journaling and topics for contemplation and meditation. But what would you acknowledge yourself for at this point in our conversation?
As I said, Paul, it's not a comfortable question for me because I'm not great at doing that. But yeah, I'm better at it. I would just, I acknowledge myself for speaking my truth, for taking myself to places that don't feel comfortable, memories and moments that don't feel comfortable, and for trying to, for finding a bit of bravery to make a little change, and actually to expose myself, to be vulnerable, to show my vulnerable side, and actually also to trust people that I can sit in a room or sit with you or sit with a friend and just be Emily. That takes that, when you haven't done that for 20 years, it can be quite a scary prospect, but the benefits are amazing.
And you're doing it. I mean, you're doing it. You're showing us what it looks like right here. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you or connect with you?
They can find me on my very cheery Instagram page, Paul, which is stepping on the sober train. There is an underscore in between each word, but it's stepping on the sober train.
And we'll definitely put that in the show notes for everybody.
Thank you. And I am currently in the process of setting myself up a website, which is called thesoberchain.com. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, like genuinely, like I said, mentioned about connection, the sort of Instagram sober community, not even people in sobriety, people that just want to say hi or just, acknowledge each other. Like I love it. So yeah, nice. That's definitely my place.
And you and I talked also, because I invite all of my guests, in addition to their own contact information or instead of, any other organizations or individuals that you'd like to acknowledge or promote or boost?
Well, I mean, I can't end without obviously acknowledging Alcoholics Anonymous and like the incredible fellowship that it is, as well as, there is CA and, other fellowships within that. It's like completely non-profit, and it astounds me every day how I haven't been to any meetings in the US, but I know that there is, it's huge. Well, it's obviously where it was founded. Yeah, I just want to acknowledge them because I feel like that's where I'm growing up in those rooms. But I also have recently, again, stepped out of my comfortable zone, and I recently took part in a 21-mile walk in one day for an amazing charity called NACOA, which is the National Association for Children of Alcoholics, which is, it's a very small charity that recently lost its funding, from the government in the UK. But if you go on their website, which hopefully you'll put a link to,
definitely,
the work they do is incredible, and it is unfortunately terrifying, the statistics of young adults and children that don't know what to do and have really nowhere to go or no one to talk to. So basically, they're a charity that provide a helpline and just support for young people. It's like 1 in 6 in the UK. So wow. I'm sure it's not too dissimilar in the US.
Well, it'll be really interesting. Obviously, this will be in the show notes as well. It'll be interesting, even though that's a UK organization. And for anyone listening from the UK, they can access that. And anyone from the US or any other country, check it out, learn from it, see what resources are available in your own home country. And if there aren't resources, maybe that's something that would be a calling for someone who does see it. So thank you, Emily, for sharing that and for just sharing your story today in the most courageous and vulnerable way. And it is a gift. It is a gift to people who are listening to it. It's been a gift for me already. And I thank you for being here with me. And I look forward to talking to you more offline.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you. Honestly, it's been a privilege. Thank you.
What an honor it is to witness these stories from these amazing human beings, and today's guest was no exception. I invite you to think about what you learned from this conversation. What stood out for you? What challenged you? What inspired you? And I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling and reflection. I can't tell you how magical it can be to set aside your expectations and just let your thoughts flow out of your head and onto paper. You don't have to have an agenda. You don't have to do anything with it, but you can be amazed at what comes out of your thoughts and onto paper and what that can do for you. I know freestyle journaling has been a powerful practice in my life for a very long time. You just never know what you might discover about yourself. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. Follow me on social media at Off the Comma, and also look for upcoming workshops and events at offthecomma.com, or better yet, go to offthecomma.com and sign up for my mailing list and let me bring the news directly to you. I am passionate about keeping this podcast ad-free so that we create a safe container for people to be able to tell their stories uninterrupted by commercials and promotions. I currently cover all the production costs, and I'm happy to continue doing so. And I'm also open to and appreciative of any donations that anyone would like to contribute. This is nothing more than to be able to support the podcast and cover some of the monthly editing and producing and equipment costs that are associated with this podcast. So it is strictly to cover production costs. It is not expected, but it is certainly welcomed and appreciated. So look for the donations link in the podcast descriptions wherever you find this podcast. Again, not expected, but certainly appreciated to cover just the cost of production. Be sure to like this episode, follow the podcast, and more importantly, spread the good word. If you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. As always, keep noticing.